Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today is the workshop for the Village of Rodolso. Today is January the 4th. I'm glad you're all here, enjoying the weather. And if you'll join me standing for a moment of silence, and then we'll do the pledge.
And thank you, God, for the moisture.
Pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
That were only true. All right. Good morning, everybody. And today, just a reminder, this is a workshop where we go over information that's proposed to be on the agenda. So we have directors and whatnot here. So there won't be any decisions made except for the ones of consent or regular. So items on the agenda. So we'll get started today. Roll call, please. Bertha.
Sir. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Mayor Crawford.
Good morning.
Councilor Jackson.
Here.
Councilor Eby.
Here.
Councilor Letterman. Here. Councilor Salas.
Here.
Councilor Cornelius.
Here.
Councilor Coughlin.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few items this morning. There's the manager and there's number 2. All right, the first item is discussion on adoption of Resolution 2022-01 declaring reasonable notice of public meetings for the Village Council of the Village of Rodolso. And Ron, okay, Bertha?
Yes, this is just simply our yearly open meetings resolution stating the date and time of our meetings and the place, which is here at the council chambers. And then there's a schedule attached that has all the meetings for the year of 2022, the regular council meetings.
Okay, so this is a renewal. Does anybody have any questions?
Nope.
No, consent.
Consent item, okay. Item number 2, discussion on adoption of Resolution 2022-02, a resolution in support of the Rodolso Downs Racetrack and to protect the economic vitality of the enterprise. And I guess that's me. I know most of you guys were here when we had the general manager and the chief operating officer in Ethan Linder talking about their proposal to go after some capital outlay to build an indoor arena, and then the possibility of a hotel and stuff down there at the at the racetrack property. So this is just showing the support that the village has for that and recognizing that it is an industry cluster, that there's so many other businesses that, spring out of that from, the lodgers, the retailers, of course, hospitality, not to mention the equine, veterinarians, all the other people that work at the industry there. Their attempt is to make this a year-round facility. So we'll have that on
Regular. Discuss it.
Okay, item number 3, discussion on ratification of cooperative education. Cooperative protective project agreement with the New Mexico Department of Transportation for the project control number RT20030 for the construction phase of the Lynx Trail Rehabilitation, the amount of $500,000. Mr. Griego.
Good morning, Mayor, Councilors. This is the next step in the formal process for the agreement for the construction funds for the Lynx rehabilitation.
Okay. So I know there's a lot of people excited about this done because we've heard about some of the deterioration. So we'll have this on regular?
I think so, yeah.
Rodney, at $500,000, how far will that go towards rehabilitating the links?
From the preliminary cost numbers, I believe that are out of the design, it looks like it will rehab the main portion of it, the
All the way around?
3-mile loop around the links, I believe. I believe in the discussions, they had mentioned they would bid out the other pieces, like the whole loop.
Right.
The connection to Meacham on the north end as additive alternates and just see what the prices came back in. But we'll have the design for all of it, but it appeared that it would just be for the main 3-mile section.
Okay, I've had a number of people reach out to me and I go, you know what, I really don't know, given the cost of just this
Right.
going out to Meacham, I don't know, so.
And it's a lot, it's different.
Simpler.
It's not,
It's overlay, isn't it, basically?
right, it'll be some overlay, there'll be some corrections of drainage, and they'll be creating a little space and doing away with the bollards on White Mountain.
So we're
It's
not-
not as extensive.
We're not rehabilitating the base, because it seems
Yeah,
like there's a lot of that.
It will be, but it's not, it's just not quite as extensive with the drainage work and crossing all the new construction.
So are we ripping up the asphalt and putting down new, or
Yes.
just, well, because you said it was an overlay, so,
It's the whole track,
It's
ripping up the whole thing.
it'll be like,
take it down to base.
pulverizing it, depending on what areas, need a different base, but it'll be pulverizing it and then relaying it.
Oh, okay.
It will not be an overlay.
Okay, okay.
Mayor, Council, I believe Rodney will be bringing back the construction documents as well.
That's what I was just getting ready to ask for, is what the bid specs are gonna be, so we can understand it better.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Item number 4 is the discussion on site evaluation and report of the Rodolso swimming pool by Pool Pro.
Back up here.
You're up here, I was wondering, so will they be here next week?
Yes, that is the plan. I've reached out to him on a couple of occasions. I haven't heard back from him, but that was the initial plan, from the get-go, from when we issued the purchase order. I know that when he made his initial trip down here, he was actually sick, and so he was actually laid up in the Mountain Gods for several days, so he was behind on the site work. It did get completed, but I need to follow up on, if he has the report ready, but, that was the initial plan, and I haven't heard anything different. So the plan is to have him here to present to council and be available to answer any questions.
And if you don't mind, Rod, if he could have the report done by the time the agenda is issued out that Thursday before, so we could read it
Yes, sir.
before.
Yep.
Number 5, discussion on lease agreement between the Village of Ruidoso and Zia
Oh,
Therapy.
that was regular, right? 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Discussion on lease agreement between the Village of Ruidoso and Zia Therapy Center, Z-Trans, in the amount of $3,600 per year.
So this is the annual lease for the office space for Z-Trans in the community center. It's, there's not a change over last year, but it's just a renewal.
Consent?
Yep.
Consent.
Hold on a minute. I was gonna ask, did we negotiate on increasing that rental price to $325 any?
You know what, I'm not exactly certain. Anthony was gonna present, but he's.
Yeah, I called him and he's out sick, and I tried calling Joe and Peggy and all them from Z-Tran, couldn't get through to them yesterday,
I don't
so.
believe it's a change.
Yeah, I was gonna be there, but would they be open to
I will visit with
a
Anthony.
$25 more a month?
Did you say 25?
$25 more a month, but that would
Is that
raise
based
it,
on
that
that?
would raise up to 3,900, yeah. And
I'll
that's
follow
still
up.
based on the 221 square foot.
What would be the point of raising $25 a month?
Cost of, gas going up, utilities increasing.
That, okay.
I mean, that's what I was just looking at
Yeah.
figuring, cause
So I've been dealing with some leases lately, and what they're doing is they're putting in a 3% per year or a cost of living index, or whichever is higher. Because $25 of 300 is what, 9%? I mean, that's percentage-wise, it's a small dollar amount, but it's a fairly substantial percentage increase.
So what are you proposing, that we look at a year over?
Well, see, the other thing with Zia-Trans, if we increase their costs, then they increased what they're gonna be asking us to subsidize.
To subsidize.
You know, and at the same time, they lowered what we were paying.
Right.
So for
Right,
that
that's
$25,
true.
it's kind of like, you know.
Okay, scratch that, Rod, just leave it the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
will do.
I wonder if we lower it, will they lower their request?
Well, it might help, if you just want to put that on what Rodolso Downs is not wanting to pay, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. Rodolso Downs is gonna back out of it pretty soon, I feel. Or
Talking
I'm
now.
seeing that.
They already back, well, they just didn't sign it.
Yeah, they didn't sign
But
it.
they're talking about re-upping it. So we want consent?
I think so.
Yes,
Okay.
just leaving it the same.
Mayor, council, you know, the concern that I have is that, you know, what they opted out of is next year's grant agreement, so.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see if Zia, put in to cover that amount, because if they opted out for next year and they don't get the funding, then they could have already cut those opportunities, you know, so.
Yeah, because I don't think we need to continue to send people to Walmart.
No.
You know, they should go to Thriftway
Or Albertsons.
or Albertsons.
And the college, yeah.
But I think we need to have a conversation with Zia to really find out what their plan is for the upcoming, you know, grant cycle,
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
which it won't be till I believe, the next federal fiscal year.
The lost gross receipts would more than pay for it.
Yeah, sure. Item number 6 is discussion on agreement between the Village of Rodolso and New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs, New Mexico State Library Division for the reimbursement of expenditures per the 2020 State General Obligation Bond Appropriation. This is
Consent?
the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Counselors, this is a go bond. We do this every couple of years when it's voted upon and citizens say, yes, they want the bond to go through. This is the money that's given out to libraries every couple of years.
Okay. Thank you.
Consent.
Okay.
Yep.
Item number 7, discussion on award of RFP 2022-005P to Pure Technologies US, Inc., DBA WOX Water Services for waterline leak detection services. Hi, guys. Look who we got up here today.
Good morning.
Good
Mayor,
morning.
councilors.
Winning.
So, we're discussing the award of the RFP, the 2022-005P, and that's going to Pure Technologies USA, Inc., DBA Wash Water Services.
Oh, it's WASH. There you go. Thank you.
Wash Water Services.
Do you think it was Walks?
Yeah, that's what I said. Nobody corrected me. Watches or, anyway.
For the water line leak detection. And we placed the legal ads in 3 newspapers. One was in Rodolso News, one was in the Albuquerque, and the other one was in the El Paso Times. And we did have 12 firms that downloaded the RFP, and we did receive 5 proposals. Out of those 5 proposals, though, only 4, because one arrived after the RFP 3 p.m. time, and it arrived at 4:24 p.m., so it deemed not responsive. And out of those 4, we deemed 2 responsive, and the responsive ones were the Metro Aqua LLC and of course, the Wash Water one. And the other 2 deemed not responsive because one of them didn't have the required signed documents of the RFP, and the other one was missing a few documents as well, so.
Okay, it was Metro Aqua, not acoustic leak detection. It was the other.
Mayor Crawford, no, it was acoustic leak and Pure Technologies.
Yeah. Okay.
The only question I have is providing more information. As I was reading through this under scope of work, they mentioned Appendix G. I couldn't find that anywhere in there, so if we could have that at the regular meeting, then I would appreciate that.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Okay,
But you said yesterday that these guys were gonna do some extra work for us too.
Yeah,
That's
so.
kinda included.
Mayor Crawford, Councilor Cornelius, So one of the things that attracted us to this firm is, they're a GIS-centric, company, so they do everything digitally. And so because of that, as they're out doing leak detection services, they'll, correct our GPS coordinates for our assets, like our fire hydrants, the meters, valves.
Oh, wow.
Anything that they tie onto as a value-added service. And then also they'll do some minor asset assessments. So like when they're hooking up to a fire hydrant, they might make note to say, this doesn't have it's missing a cap, or there's something that's wrong with the asset, so that we can at least flag that for future repairs. So that was one of the things that we were really excited about working with this company.
Good deal.
Very good. Okay, we'll have that on the discussion.
Yeah, regular.
Regular item. Item number 8, discussion on agreement with Pure Technologies US, Inc., DBA Wash Water Services for water line leak detection services, and so this is the actual agreement.
Yes, Mayor Crawford, councilors. So this has the standard agreement that we'd normally have, and attached to it is the fee services. And I'd like to note that, you know, and you'll see it in Appendix J when we attach that for you.
Thank you.
Councilor Salas, is that we did this in a manner that would allow us to utilize this company in calling them out for spot leak detection services, including response for natural disasters. So if we had a event that might have impaired some of our water lines, we could call them out. We did this in a federal procurement process so that we could get reimbursement from any type of FEMA funds for those assessments. Looking at the per cost, they're well within our budget. So we'll present a task order to you guys next council meeting, but just a rough estimate of them doing our entire town, it would be about $130,000. And Judy and I budgeted $200,000 for this process, so they're well within our anticipated budget.
Do we know what section of town we're doing, what subdivisions?
We are doing the entirety
All
of
of
the
All of
town
it.
for this first shot. And then after that, we'll do approximately 20% of town every year after that.
Okay,
And so we'll do everything on a rotating basis. So once every 5 years, every water pipe should be tested based on our current setup. We're gonna work out a strategy with this company. If we need to increase that, we'll pursue increasing it. But right now, our economic return of interval for leak detection services is once every 5 years. We should get an economic return from it.
okay. Thank you.
Eric, looking at the pricing schedule, it says large diameter pipe greater than 12 inches. Are they only doing big pipes, or are they gonna do everything? Because I don't see any pricing for,
So that is for that's just for their smart ball inspection platform.
okay,
Which we won't be utilizing.
Okay.
It's just, this is a big, national firm, and so this is their, standard pricing sheet for that equipment.
okay.
We don't anticipate utilizing any of that type of equipment.
So then the other section in the pricing is valve. I don't see anything that talks about the cost it's gonna do for testing all the pipes.
So if you, look at the fee schedule on page 135, it gives a per mile cost, for the leak detection. So if we're doing our regular, scheduled.
We don't have a page 135.
I think I did see the per mile
in
cost.
there.
Oh, the per
Yeah,
mile,
I
okay.
saw the
got it.
next 3 miles,
Excuse
next
me.
3 miles, then remaining
Okay.
mileage
Got it.
greater than 10
So for
miles.
those, we'll have a base fee for $4,000 mobilization, and then $400 per mile.
$400 per mile, okay.
So we're a little over 300 miles of pipe.
Pipe, okay. Okay,
And the other ones, so for post-disaster, or if we call them out for a special leak, it would be an hourly rate, so they would do $200 per hour plus then the $4,000.
But a $4,000 mobilization for each one of them.
Correct. Not for each leak that they're going, but each instance that they come out. So for,
Well, that's what I'm saying. So when you say a leak detection services post-disaster, give me an example.
so let's say we had an earthquake and we wanted to sample all of our lines or a section of town. We would call them out. It would cost $4,000 for them to come out, and then after that, it would be $200 per hour. So let's say they worked full-time for a week. We would pay them the $200 times the 40 hours.
Okay. But just on a regular leak detection,
So
it's going to
our-
be that's the 20% is what you're talking about?
Yeah, so anywhere from 20 to 100% of the regular annual inspections, that would be a per mile charge. And it actually should be a better deal for us with the $400 per mile, because it typically would take them over several hours to do a mile. So this does represent a cost savings versus their hourly rate.
But each one of them would still have the $4,000.
That's-
So you're limiting it to 5. Most mobilizations that we'll have on that, it would be 5?
No, the mobilization is just when they come out for an instance, that's their $4,000. So if they're out here for 2 months to do our whole system, you would just have that one mobilization.
But you said for an instance, I mean,
So let's say they weren't part of it wasn't part of our regular annual maintenance inspections. And, we were getting a lot of demand off of, let's say, grindstone tanks. And so we wanted to come out and sample around the grindstones distribution area. That would be a special call out, so we pay them $4,000 for a mobilization and then $200 per hour to do sections of town that we call out specifically.
okay. So we wouldn't be calling them if we have a loss of pressure or a reduction in pressure, we're not sure where
This
it's
would be-
at?
Yeah, this would be a pretty special instance.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. I just didn't want to have them on
So-
speed dial or whatever.
Yeah, no, and we're working on acquiring, or updating our sounding equipment, so we'll have some in-house capabilities to do these kind of emergency soundings.
Okay.
But we just don't have the staff and capacity to do the regular, maintenance check.
Okay.
Are we including the diversion lines from Eagle Creek and Upper Canyon in this? I didn't read it thoroughly, but I'm assuming.
So one of the complications, Counselor Salas, with doing that is with the sounding equipment, it kind of works off of pressure going through the line.
Oh,
So
okay.
there might not be the same capacity, but we will work with the contractor to see if we can potentially assess these raw water lines as part of this process.
I was really more curious from the wells in Eagle Creek,
And that's something where it might be where we deploy the large diameter smart ball. But we'll have to plan for that. We do have it within our budget because, like I said, Judy and I budgeted
Right.
for the $200,000, so we still have, $70,000 wiggle room that we could potentially assess the Eagle Creek line and then also the line to the Grindstone Reservoir.
Okay.
Mayor, I had a point of clarification. Whoa, that's loud. Eric, you said that you and Judy budgeted. Do you mean you put it in the annual budget, or are you asking for a budget resolution of the council, a budget adjustment?
It was in the, budget, we had some money, in prior years, and we were rolling them over.
So my question is, did you include that in the annual budget, or are you
Annual.
gonna be, having a bar that represents that?
Already in the budget?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
It was just clarification because, he said that they budgeted, but the council's the one that does the budget.
Okay, yeah.
Want to make sure that we're not coming back later with a budget resolution.
Oh, gotcha.
I always want to make sure we establish budget authority prior to, spending.
Sure, thank you for reminding us. Okay, so do you want to?
I'd like to see it on regular.
Yeah,
Okay.
regular.
Item number 9, discussion on pardon me, flood damage from July 2021 and possible participation in the Emergency Watershed Protection Program through the Natural Resources Conservation NRCS group.
Mayor, just giving a little bit of lead into this while Eric gets up and running. Oh, I guess he's ready to go.
I'm not ready to go.
Okay,
I'm not ready to go. Tim.
Oh, you're not ready to
Go
go?
ahead,
Okay. Mayor, as you recall, going back to the July 6th flood, there's several different actions we're taking to assess the damages. One of those was working with the Natural Resource NRCS service, whatever, but it's a federal program through the USDA. And they were going and assessing the various damages to the watershed area, to the banks and whatnot that occurred. Prior, going back to, I believe it was the Dolly flood, they came in and they helped repair some of the damage that occurred along the river. That's most of where you see those pink gunite walls. And as Eric has been assessing that since that time, there's a difference of opinion on the approach. So Eric's gonna give us a presentation on that and give us some recommendations. With what's been presented to me, I do concur with his recommendations.
So Mayor Crawford, councilors, since this is your first time meeting Chris, despite him working for the village for 3 years, I'd like to give Chris an opportunity just to talk about his company and his experience with river restoration.
Hello.
Sorry, not for me. Mayor Crawford and councilors.
I don't know who that is.
Somebody on
Uh-huh.
Hello?
Oh, no, they didn't show up one time, but now they're all there.
Robin, mute.
Robin,
I think she got it.
how's that work? Oh, yeah. Okay. You always got to be aware. There's always a camera. There's always a recording.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crawford and councilors, my name is Chris Phillips. I own and operate a small civil engineering consulting business, and we specialize in river engineering, probably the only company in the state of New Mexico that does that. We also do work in southern Colorado, and for the last 22 years, we've been doing river restoration projects, flood mitigation projects, fish habitat projects, wetlands restoration throughout New Mexico and southern Colorado. And we've been helping the village of Rodolso on a variety of things for the last 3 years. We've got a lot of projects where the iron's in the fire. We've got a little bit of completed projects that you may be aware of, such as the wetlands over below Grindstone Canyon Dam. Relatively small, but in my opinion, fairly successful project. The elk love it in particular, and that wasn't our intended outcome, but they appreciate the wildlife, the water play area that we've created for them. I was out here at the behest of some private landowners back in 2008 to look at some of the damage to the Rio Ruidoso, particularly in the Upper Canyon area, following the flood in 2008. And, at that time, the NRCS was out there actively talking to landowners and offering assistance, and we ultimately did not do any work for private landowners, and they liked some of the things we were suggesting, but I have to say the power of the free dollar was so tempting that many of the landowners said, well, I'll take the free government assistance. They're going to design it, they're going to pay for it, and unfortunately my company's not able to provide that as a private entity. So, and maybe there was less sophistication at the village about what was in the best interest of the village and the river. In any case, there was a lot of walls that were built by the NRCS at that time. Many of you have seen them out there.
for their intended purpose, protecting specific properties. They seem to have worked fairly well. But as we get into this presentation, I'd like to show you a few of the unintended consequences that have happened since then. Thank you, Eric. Please.
So I'm gonna start off and just give a summary for our audience and YouTube about the flood event and what we kind of witnessed in July. So as we talked about before, you know, our July event was kind of a unique situation where, you know, we had some heavy precipitation in the several days before the flood event, where we basically saturated the soils in the upper watershed. We had approximately 2 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. And then on the July 6th date, we had a real concentrated, heavy isolated precipitation event in the upper watershed that put anywhere of 2.5 to 3 inches of rain in a couple hours. So just very small area. The rest of the area just had some light precipitation. And so that's why we had a flood event in town where there wasn't any rain actually in town. And so the storm surge was pretty abrupt. We basically had a wall of water that came through town, knocking out our gauging station at the boundary of Mescalero and the village of Rodolso. This didn't even capture the total flows before the gauge was taken out of commission. Looking at the flows at the Hollywood gauge, which is further downstream, we see that the flows went up to 3,400 CFS, and that was after the event had some time to elongate. As it went through town, the peak amount lowered down. So we can probably make the assumption that there was more than 3,400 CFS that was flowing through the Upper Canyon at its peak. And so here's a picture of the flood event at the Upper Canyon surface diversion, showing the heavy sediment load and some of the woody debris that was coming down. Most of which caught on our bridges and caused some of the bridges that were still just culverts that are scheduled to be replaced to be topped over. And so some of the damages we saw, like I was discussing, culverts and bridges, we had 4 culvert-based bridges that overtopped and caused substantial damage to them. This one happens to be McDaniel Bridge, which was one of the more heavily hit bridges. We also had a substantial amount of channel down cutting. So what I mean by that is the channel was, there was such a velocity in the water that the channel started cutting down. It started eroding the bed and cut the river down. And so we can see, you know, that there's no way this owner built this wall hanging in the air. So when this wall was built, there was probably soil up on this footer area. And you can see the evidence of channel down cutting all through up and down the river, where you have these steeper banks. Grass like this falling down is pretty indicative that there was a down cutting event. We did see some lateral bank erosion, but there wasn't as much of that as there was down cutting, and in part because of the previous gabion basket walls. We did see debris and some sedimentation, where we have this material dropping out in floodplain areas. And then we did see some damage to some structures, such as this house in the Upper Canyon, where the river was actually flowing underneath the footers of this retaining wall that the house is actually sitting on top of. And And so even though the setup of the events were different between the July event and Hurricane Dolly was more of an event that stayed there and just kept raining. This was more of just a real quick flash of rain. There's a lot of similarities. Here is the, right at the Mescalero, Rodolso boundary at Treatment Plant 1. Here is Hurricane Dolly. Here is some of the post damage of the July event. And so we can see that based on this debris field that the water did come up on the same road. So it was similar in some aspects to Dolly. Here's another picture of Dolly right at the Meacham Bridge and then Eagle Bridge in Midtown. So as Chris talked about, in 2008, the village sponsored the Emergency Watershed Protection Program with the NRCS and utilized federal funds to implement some of the NRCS structures.
Thank you, Eric. Mayor Crawford, councilors. The EWP program, as we read it, is designed, it's a federally funded program, is designed to help communities repair flood damage. And the sponsor, in this case the village, is required to pay 25% of the cost of those repairs. And in 2008, I'm not entirely sure personally, but it appears that the village did not have a comprehensive plan for how they thought repairs should be accomplished. The NRCS was there. They had pockets full of funding, and they said this is the solution, and a lot of stuff got done. And that was beneficial in many locations. In fact, these gabion walls, a gabion, as you may know, is a wire basket filled with rock, and then they sprayed cement or shotcrete, colored shotcrete, so they're somewhat attractive, to build these walls in various parts of town. And in the photograph on the right, you see the benefit of protecting a home that's perhaps a little too close to the river, but it's now protected from future damage. In this other case, the photo on the left, we have dual walls. The homes on the left are set back a little further, and there's no homes on the right. So the logic of where these walls were installed, in retrospect, we're not entirely sure, but for preventing lateral erosion, they worked pretty well. It was also, there are a few places where they installed large rock on the bank of the river, but this was the dominant solution for the 2008 mitigation. How do I advance the slide?
You can just tell me and I'll do it for you.
Since 2008, these walls have by and large stood up fairly well. What we've seen, though, throughout town, in almost, well, it's visible in over half the locations and suspect in several, at least another 25% of locations, is that the channel bed has cut down over time, and we think a significant part of that downcutting occurred in this most recent flood event. And the result is that the wall has been scoured. There's a hole now underneath the wall. The wall's hanging there in the air. And that's of concern. The wall is still structurally sound for now, but it raises questions about the long-term stability of it. And in the 2008 event, the village as the sponsor agreed to maintain these structures for 20 years. And when the village staff reviewed the 2021 flood event and walked some of these sites with the NRCS, we collectively pointed out that this appeared to be exacerbated or made worse by the most recent flood, and we wanted to help repair these sites as part of the EWP application that we'd like to make this year, or 2021, we're now into 22. Unfortunately, the NRCS at least the local staff have taken the opinion that the grade control that would be necessary to prevent the channel bed from down cutting is not their responsibility. They've taken the opinion that that's a maintenance responsibility that the village should have to take care of on their own.
Of course.
I'm not sure that was clearly divulged in
I think
2008.
20 years is up.
I wasn't at those meetings, I apologize for that. But in my professional opinion, as a hydraulic engineer, I can tell you that when you build a wall like this, you confine the flow of the river. And what that does in a flood event is it forces more water into a smaller space. It gets deeper and it goes faster. And the wall makes a smooth surface for that water to travel along. So the force, the energy in the water to scour the bed of the channel actually increases. And in my opinion, that's an unintended consequence of some of these walls. And in the photograph on the left, this is fairly far up in the upper canyon. Again, there's a structure on, just off the, out of view on the right, which the right wall is protecting, but on the left, it's not clear what structures those are protecting. But again, you've got walls on both sides that confines the river. It tends to accelerate flood flows. And right below where the two walls end, there's quite a bit of scour occurring next to this house shown on the right. Yes, the house is built perhaps a little too close to the river, but the two walls upstream have tended to create a shotgun effect for that water going right down where this house is. Next slide, please. Slide on the right, further downstream, another pair of walls that were built not by the NRCS, but by some well-intended homeowners, and that has channelized the river. The structures are fairly far back, so it's unclear why walls were necessary in this location, but perhaps that was the aesthetic that the homeowners desired. You get to the downstream end of those two walls, and again, it's a shotgun effect. The water comes blasting out on the picture on the left, and it scours the bed of the channel. In this case, there's about a 4-foot drop, because it's just scoured the bed of the channel away.
Chris, I'm sorry, can a homeowner do that?
Well, I mean, so it's unlikely that they could do that now with the permitting process. But, you know, some of this stuff was done quite a long time ago. So I don't know exactly when these walls were created, but some of the walls that we see in the Upper Canyon were built in the 50s.
Okay. Sorry, Chris.
And I'll just point out that the picture on the right, there's nothing in the bed of the channel to prevent channel bed down cutting, and it's down cut some, but the real saving grace for these two walls is shown in the picture on the left, where there's actually a sewer line that crosses the river, and the concrete encasement of that sewer line is actually creating the ledge that the water's pouring over. So our sewer line is protecting these walls upstream from further down cutting. Next slide, please.
And I just want to also point out too that, you know, you can see that here's a new NRCS gabion basket that was put after Dolly. So these walls were here before Dolly, and look at the amount of damage that it caused at Hurricane Dolly, where we had this substantial scour effect, and that's why they built this wall all the way down there.
Okay, well, here's the same river, your river, different location. And I can't see any flood damage. I can see debris. Look how high the water got.
Yeah.
And you can see this on the other trees, other places. What's different about this? Well, what's different is that there's a wide bench on both sides. There's no walls to confine the flow. So the water has a little chance to spread out. And the middle of the river channel, where that main force of water that you saw in that earlier picture, there's nothing blocking that flow. So if we can allow the worst of it to charge down the middle and leave enough room on the sides for the water to spread out a little bit, you don't have any damage. This doesn't cost anything to repair, and it's pretty fine as it is. There's 2 locations. The next one, please. Another couple of locations. Even in the left photo, this homeowner has a small patio wall, which did get overtopped in the flood, and they had to come back and put some decorative gravel back in. But relatively small price to pay for surviving a 500-year flood or worse. Otherwise, no structural damage. So the difference in just a little bit of setback from the river and a little bit of management makes a big difference. And I believe that while walls, as the kind you've seen before, are an important component of overall river management, particularly where you've got an important structure or a bridge or something that's just a little too close to the river, we need to put in that heavy protection. But if we don't need it, it doesn't help us to put it in. Next slide, please. The NRCS did come back to the village and said, well, here's the things we're willing to do under the EWP program this year. And they gave Eric and his staff this spreadsheet, and it proposed more gabion structures, some rock riprap, removal of debris, some more concrete. There was no map to show where that would occur. We did eventually get a few GPS points that we could try to search out with a handheld about where that would go. There was no acknowledgement about grade control. We asked for grade control to be incorporated into this because we saw areas that needed it. We asked for help to mitigate along the existing walls. That's not included in here. That was deemed a maintenance responsibility for the village, not part of EWP. And in fact, I'm sorry, Eric, I just have to divulge this, is that, we made the assertion that a significant part, perhaps not all, but a significant part of the erosion next to the existing walls was caused by the 2021 flood event. And we were left with being told that we had to prove that all that damage occurred as a result of that one event. Well, short of having done a comprehensive survey of 6 miles of river the week before and having the foresight to know that it needed to be done, there was no way for us to actually prove that all that occurred just as a result of one event. It put the village in, I think, a fairly difficult position of, well, how do you prove it? We're fairly certain of it. I mean, I have some clues out there. So the village tried to think this through. Next slide, please. And did hire my company to do a small assessment. We produced a report in early November. We went through and itemized all the areas within the river, whether it was near an NRCS wall or not, private wall or not, erosion of banks, down cutting in the riverbed. We looked at all the locations that, in our professional opinion, were damaged in the 2021 flood. We quantified them. We built spreadsheets and developed costs for that, and submitted that to the village. We built maps, not comprehensive design maps, but maps that showed all the different locations. So the village then, on short order for a reasonable fee, got a comprehensive plan of what needs to be fixed here, in our opinion. What was damaged by the flood? And in our opinion, therefore, we should be able to ask for EWP funding to make those fixes because it was a result of this flood event. Next slide, please. There are some NRCS walls or style walls that we think do need to be put in. But in other locations, the solution to down cutting, in our opinion, is not more concrete. These are types of structures that prevent the channel bed from down cutting. And by the way, they make for pretty good fish habitat. We've built these types of structures all over, hundreds or more, in some cases thousands. These are all structures we build that prevent the channel bed from down cutting, even in a flood event. Next slide, please. Other structures are intended for preventing lateral channel migration, i.e. erosion of the stream bank, with piles of rocks built on the side of the channel to keep the current from eroding, or buried woody debris that also keeps the stream bank from eroding, and also planting of vegetation that has tenacious root systems to help hold the stream banks in place. We included a fair bit of this in our restoration/repair cost estimate because these are things that work. They're completely approved within the NRCS vocabulary. I'm certified as an NRCS technical service provider. I know all of what their specs are. These are all things that they promote. The difference now comes is whether or not the local people want to agree that this is qualified for under the EWP program. The rest of the NRCS would say, yes, this is absolutely what we want you to do. Stay away from concrete. However,
Chris, in the previous slide, some of the examples you gave was the log pour over and the boulder weirs. Don't those collect debris at the same time? Because my understanding was part of the problem with this event was there was such a accumulation of debris far up into the Mescalero portion, and that all washed down. So do these tend to have unintended consequences as well?
fair question. Would you go back one slide, please? In all of these cases, these structures sit in the bed of the channel. The flood event is 4 or 5 feet deep. It goes right over the top and doesn't even see these. There's not enough mass that sticks up to block the flow to actually catch and entrap anything. However, next slide, please. The woody debris structure in the middle here does do exactly what you're talking about, and that's actually part of the long-term fish habitat benefit is that these structures they're root wads sticking out from the bank. We bury the trunk back in there and stick it out. You get a little scour underneath, which is a great pocket water for fishing, but it catches debris over time. And that tends to, over time, build a stronger, more complete wall by natural accretion on the ends of those log root wads. However, if you look in that middle photo, there's plenty of room for the flood water to take a shortcut and go over that point bar. It doesn't need to go around the corner. It just takes the shortcut and goes over the point bar on the other side of the river. So you're right, this may catch some of that debris, but not enough to block the brunt of the flow. They don't stick out in the channel more than, worst case, about 25% of the low flow channel. Okay. And if we have those benches in that wider area on both sides, you've got, remember, that flood water is 4 or 5 feet deep. It doesn't see this because it's relatively small and sitting down low. Does that help, sir?
Yeah, so over time, it's gonna, like that woody debris, it's gonna continue collecting some debris, which is natural. Is there some type of maintenance that needs to be done, 5 years, 10 years, to go in and remove some of that collection of debris? Because I could see it, and I'm not you, I'm just looking at it my way, is all of a sudden it starts collecting and it starts growing out further and further and changing that flow of the normal water structure. So all of a sudden we're changing the flow of the stream or the river.
Well, no, it's a fair concern. We've never seen that extend over time out into the stream. What we have seen is that the organic matter that collects in those pockets makes a good soil bed. And now we start seeing things sprouting and growing in there, and that's ideal. I'd like to see naturally recruited riparian vegetation take root and take over. Good riparian vegetation with a strong root mass is incredibly effective at preventing stream bank erosion. Our problem is we don't have that root mass on day one when we plant it. So we need 3, 4, 5 years to get that to be functionally, to be fully functional. So if I can then promote, we often plant willow clumps between these logs to promote that and speed the process. So by the time those logs have rotted in 15 to 20 years, I've got a solid bank of vegetation that takes over, and much of that material has been recruited on its own.
This is all indigenous stuff,
Yes, sir.
so we won't be talking in 20 years about we need to jerk all these cedars out of there like they did in Texas. I remember when they planted all those to stave off what we're talking about here, and then they drink so much water that we had water issues. So this is a natural alternative that is still
Yes, sir.
long-term viable.
Yes, sir. And I will, I'll just briefly say that you may have noticed that whether we're showing areas damaged or even in those slides where they're undamaged, There's very little riparian vegetation along the river today. And personally, I think that's, it's something that's missing. I think it's missing because landowners not understanding the value of it have cut it down. And we have a resident population of elk and deer here that are very aggressive about browsing. So in our restoration costs, actually, where we asked the NRCS to help fund putting some of this vegetation back in, we purposefully included costs to build temporary fencing around clusters of these plantings. Let's plant a cluster, put a fence around it to prevent browsing, let it get established. And then we've got a chance to keep it. If we just plant it with no fence, it'll get browsed away. And a component of that also is now to help the landowners understand that this is beneficial. And where we've done this in other locations, we have a cluster, then there's a big gap, then there's another cluster. They're close enough to to provide sort of continuous bank erosion protection, but wide enough gap that the homeowners get the views that they want. Not unimpeded, but it helps. And if they're birders, they come to find out over time, well, now there's a bunch of birds I want to look at that are nesting in there. And so there's all these benefits. We don't have to block the river off, but we do need some. And part of that is education, I believe, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, please. Whoops, sorry, Chris. Okay. Just a couple more slides here. Where the NRCS existing walls from 2008 exist, we proposed to basically fill the bottom of the channel with some rock and then some bigger rocks on 50-foot spacing that would help prevent more scour and down cutting. We thought this was a reasonable compromise to protect their walls. We felt like they should help to fund this work through their program. The left photograph does note some of the standard NRCS conservation practices, which these measures would fulfill and completely comply with. And, you know, when we first heard that, well, we just, you know, them saying that the solution to those undermining the walls was just to pump some concrete under there, that was concerning because when you've got a wall, now you've got one side that's concrete, and if we start filling up the bottom of the channel with concrete, now we're losing a lot of functionality in the bottom of the channel. And it's not just a place for the gravels to move through, but that's where a lot of the bugs grow and live, is in the rocky substrate at the bottom of the channel. Those macroinvertebrate bugs that spend most of their life as funny-looking creatures crawling around at the bottom, at the end of their lifespan, they emerge, they become bugs, fly around for a few weeks, get eaten by the fish, and die. Incredibly important for the food chain for the fish. And if we want to bring back a resilient river and have a sustainable fish population, we got to have something for them to eat. We can't go out and feed them every morning. And so we proposed to put in rocks in the bottom of the channel that would recreate some of that natural bug habitat in the bottom of the channel. We do not have approval for this yet, but just saying, we're trying to find a balance between them. Next slide, please. Because as I said here, on the right-hand slide, there are places where, yeah, we need a wall. The damage, that further erosion of the stream bank there behind, is this the Pine Tree Mall?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And fortunately, the building is not in immediate danger, but it could be if that riverbank continues to erode and the shotcrete that was put on there perhaps a decade or more ago is now falling apart. This is a place where we do need a wall. The cost of failure of this infrastructure is far too high. Great, let's put it in there. But in other locations, on the slide on the left, do we really need another wall down here to solve the problem? That's sort of where we're at. And at this point, the NRCS has told us that they're only willing to approve more walls or rock lining of the riverbanks. No grade control, no planting.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they've taken a very, this is my opinion, sir, a very narrow view of what the program does include and doesn't. And they've said to us, well, nope, it specifically says you can't do this and you can't do that.
And Mayor Crawford, we've reviewed all of the NEPA documentation for this program, and they've analyzed several projects over the decades, and the NEPA documentation basically tells the NRCS that they're to use natural stream restoration techniques and include plantings and bioengineering in their design solutions. And we've showed them that, we've told them that. It's just,
Is this countrywide, nationwide, or is this New Mexico Prime?
this is a nationwide program.
That they're using the concrete and the gunite and the,
So most of the other places in the nation have switched to more natural streams.
do we have a congressman that's in the cement business or something, like we do the lawyers and everything else?
I mean,
Eric, just real quick, when you're using acronyms, make sure, like NEPA.
okay,
explain what
Yeah, go over those, I have my deficiency in recollection of.
sorry, the NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Act, and it's basically a program that it came about from the interstate system where, the federal highways were putting in all these systems. They were demolishing wetlands. They were doing some irreparable harm to the environment, and so they made
Migration back and forth.
So they made a process to evaluate federal dollars to make sure that it doesn't have unnecessary environmental and cultural impacts. And so that's one of the other things to consider, is they consider the socioeconomic and cultural implications of a project, which, in my opinion, they haven't properly considered that we're a tourism-based economy, and, we can't just have a bunch of shot-creating walls when fishing and the natural environment is such a big draw for people to come here.
So what you're saying is, the one on the right there, we'll have to put the wall in just to protect it because there's already too much under it.
Interestingly, the NRCS refuses to do that project there because they say it brings too much liability to them. So the spots where we actually do feel that we need walls, they don't want to put walls.
What do you mean by gray matter?
Gray matter.
You said something about gray.
I didn't hear gray matter.
I have some gray matter.
Yes, so do I. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry if
I didn't hear that. I don't know. But what you're saying is, years ago, you could fish here. And then maybe because of what we did in 2008, or what was done, that's why it's deteriorated so much that it doesn't work on a good fish population. So that with going with these measures that you are proposing, that we could eventually have a functioning ecosystem for fishing. And so instead of going with the proposal that the NCRS is doing,
Mayor Crawford.
NRCS.
Very good. Mayor Crawford, councilors. Last slide that I'll talk on. Here's another example of two walls on the left-hand side that were built in 2008, and nothing to protect the bottom of the stream channel. There's been significant downcutting that's occurred since then. In our opinion, the majority of that happened in 2011, this summer. But I put this slide up because it's not hard to imagine that if the solution was to put concrete in the bottom of the channel to prevent downcutting, now look how close you are to a tributary to the Los Angeles River.
Yeah.
Is that what you want for your community? I would ask you that as a council, rhetorically, what's your vision here? I'd like to promote, I think you've got some great opportunities here. Just speaking personally, sir, I think the Rio Rodolso is a great asset for the community. I think it's been loved, and perhaps in some cases loved a little too hard. I don't think that what it takes to maintain it and protect it has been fully appreciated, but there's no reason that we can't bring it back. It's got the resiliency. Eric has already got funding for another project down at Two Rivers that the state is going to give us money to go back in and build pools and fish habitat and start to bring it back there. Here, we're dealing with flood damage, and we're saying we'd like to do it in a way that's compatible with the long-term vision, at least what I think ought to be a vision for the Rio Ruidoso. And we're meeting with some resistance. We're being told if it's not a structure that doesn't protect a structure, we won't give you money. And we've been scratching our head how best to do this. We felt we needed to bring this to the governing body and have you be in on the decision about whether or not because, you know, the NRCS wants to do a $1.4 million project. All you gotta do is pay 25%.
And maintain it for 20 years.
And I'd like to point out that that's just new walls. That's them ignoring the existing damage to walls. So Chris's solution is an equivalent in price, but it actually fixed the impairment throughout the river on all of the structures.
And probably with less impact to the residents, or about the same at least, but
And more impact for the future for
Yeah.
the
Well, what I-
restoration of a beautiful.
What I find so interesting in listening to you is if the NRCS solution is so good, then why do we have to maintain it for 20 years after the fact? And we can see that the 2008 didn't last 20 years. It created more problems. And then that one picture there of that wall, and they're saying, no, because if you do that, it puts too much liability on us. So, I mean, it's kind of like.
they built it and put the liability on us and property.
Well, the NRCS is saying if we fund that, then it's gonna put liability on them. And it's like, well, because you're putting in a substandard structure, and it seems like there's an acknowledgement there that what their plan is horrible. So, gosh.
I feel like we should make it as natural as possible.
Yeah, because the only way I can see to prevent that undercutting, and again, I'm not the expert, is trench out, pour your footing down a couple of feet below the stream bed, but then you're gonna get like that LA River channel. And I was there when they were building the LA River channel. I mean, it didn't used to look like that, but it does now. And
Well, the Riverwalk in San Antonio,
yep.
it's what you want, but I agree with you 100%. And that picture was pretty remarkable, the comparison.
Yeah.
Where we could be. And that's one of the things that we've not wanted to do. It looks like Six Flags, that Pink Rock, the Gunite or whatever that stuff is. And that was really before our time.
Well, I like the fact that you're got a project for Two Rivers Park, and this is what I was gonna suggest, is that maybe if we do that project as an example of what we can do, especially for the Upper Canyon residents, would see that, okay, yeah, if we're building a wall here or adding more rock or something like that, because that's public land, it gives an example of what the projects we're trying to endorse. I mean, I'm just suggesting that. I know we need it all over, but I was more concerned with the all those railroad ties. It won't be long before they're all down.
Yes.
And get that going.
So what you're saying is we need to come together and reject the proposal by the NRCS.
Mayor, I have a couple of questions before we go to that discussion, but yes, that's a decision that they're asking us to make. They're asking us to actually make that decision about a week ago or so, and we said, wait a minute, let us discuss this further and have a conversation, but they're basically saying, take it or leave it. In your presentation, you talked about proof of how the damage occurred. Did they give you any type of guidance as to modeling or whatnot? And did we take that approach? Because looking at that, I think we need to establish whether it was a maintenance issue or not, because that creates continued liability for us. Our agreements that were on the books, I believe, goes to 2028. Is that right?
Yep.
So that's the other issue that we've had. We've just had the NRCS arbitrarily tell us that it's 20 years, but we haven't actually seen the documentation and agreements to say that we have that obligation. So that's something that we need to dig into further. But yes, it would be 2028, 29.
But I think a simple modeling of saying, there hasn't been that type of energy in that river to create that kind of scouring or damage and whatnot, and, that would create our argument. I don't think there's been those type of flows in the river since Dolly, has there?
I don't believe so, but we'd have to go through and check. We did talk with the NRCS, and they did request us to do some surveys at some of the key locations for the hazard mitigation project, because we did have some before surveys. But unfortunately, when I was putting together my scope of work, I didn't specify for the survey company to survey in the flowing water. And so they didn't survey in that area. And what happens with these structures is you have a big scouring effect. And then as you have slower flows, you start depositing silt, or sometimes right after the flood event, you'll have it scour out, the structure is impaired and under threat of failure, but as soon as those flood waters start slowing down, all the sediment drops out in there, and so you don't actually see that there's a scour effect, but the problem is all the material there is just sand and light gravel that even some of the lightest events could scour out.
Mayor Crawford and Mr. Dodge, we did exactly what you said. We not only took the cross-section locations that Eric resurveyed, we looked at other locations and did the hydraulic calculations of how deep would the scour occur. But the depth of scour is dependent on two things: the cross-section and the force of water, and also the size of the bed sediments. And the bed sediment size that we see now is pretty fine-grained. It's mostly sands and small gravels. Well, that size, we think, has been deposited sort of at the end of the flood event. It wasn't there and didn't just stay there during the flood, because the calculations show it could scoop out 4 or 5 feet of that during the flood event. But now we see it fill back up most of the way up to where it was before. So unfortunately, the calculations are not a method. We thought that might be a way to prove that this was because of the flood event, but we find that even in like a 25-year event, we can get significant scouring. So how do we say that nothing's happened since 2008 and it's only the one event? It became very difficult for us to say that only that event could have created this scour.
Well, it looks like through the rain gauges and river gauges and all the things that were monitored, wouldn't there be some sort of history of the
Yes,
flows?
We can go through and look at the history of flows since Dolly and put those together, but, you know, again, with our analysis, it shows that it doesn't take a whole lot of flow to show scour at the locations where we took samples, because, you know, the damage is already there. And we can't necessarily show that it's just explicitly there. And it's not really fair for the NRCS to have us demonstrate it when there's such, I mean, all of you guys see the photos of the down cutting that I show you, and it makes absolute sense that, yes, we had this huge peak flow. Of course, there's this down cutting damage, you see it, but they've just turned the blind eye on that. And, you know, they could have used the same argument to not have any of the structures that they recommended, because they could have said that at all of them. You know, well, did the flood cause this? I mean, who knows, because there's not a before picture of it.
Mayor, Eric and Chris, the other concern that I want to bring up, I'm not concerned, but, you know, they talked, and I believe it's Kenneth who is really trying to make a determination at his level. Is there an appeal process for that?
So unfortunately, in the CFR process, there's explicitly not an appeal process. There used to be one, and they eliminated it out of their program manual. So based on the CFR, technically,
CFR, what is that?
I'm sorry,
Code of Federal Regulations, sir.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's good.
It does give the state conservationists the authority to say whether a project is eligible or not, and they have the final determination. And so, you know, it is, the NRCS can say, yeah, this is what it is, this is the last straw, but I do think that there's still pressure that we can put on them, because, you know, we've not proposed anything that's absurd. Everything we've proposed is within the confines of the NRCS approved standard practices. And in the environmental impact statement for the NEPA process for the program, they actively tell the NRCS that you guys should be doing these things. So, you know, our community is asking for this. It makes absolute sense for them to fund these projects.
Well, couldn't an argument be that the NEPA process wasn't followed properly? Because you said, you know, economic and socioeconomic factors are pulled into that, and it appears as though they didn't take that into account.
It's something that we can poke at. it sometimes can be difficult to pursue that NEPA process.
Because isn't that a public, the NEPA process involves public comment?
So it's a little bit nuanced because so when they have the programmatic environmental impact statement for the program is like a nationwide. They've done this nationwide where there was public comment, and then there's a secondary NEPA process that isn't as necessarily open to the public, and they can do scoping that's very specific and not just open to the general public. So if you want to talk to somebody about Forest Service process,
Yes.
like for the Forest Service, you have your forest plan, that's the programmatic EIS, and then they do a NEPA analysis for the individual projects. They still have to do scoping, but they don't have to necessarily have a public comment for it.
Okay. Okay. 'Cause I know
Well, this is Jackson, Mr. Mayor and Eric. During the time that we were mapping with drone the riverbank for hazard mitigation and sewer connection, and also Mosen and Corbin did an actual walk through portions of this, was any of that documented to the point that you could use it as a pre-event to demonstrate the riverbank erosion?
So Mayor Crawford, Councilor Jackson, we do have that data available, but what we're talking about is, with the scour event, it scoured out the large material, but as the flood recedes, the silt drops down. So, we can't necessarily easily do a post-flood survey, and that's just the way that these flood events can work.
I think he's talking about that there's video and pictures of the rocks, because we've seen them. And then the rocks are way down on somebody else's property, and there's the small gravel that's there. That doesn't show that was damaged. Is that what you're saying, Jackson?
Right, that it was prior to the event in July that we did this mapping by drone and walking the river just for hazard mitigation and sewer connection. I'm just asking, was there enough visual documentation there to show what it was like at that time, much prior to the July event?
Right, the historical surveys that were done and all the different.
Mayor and Council, I think, Eric, you did say that you did go back and look at some of the surveying information from the
Yes.
hazard mitigation project and did a comparison.
Yeah, and so we did share that with the NRCS, but like I said, the problem was when we did our follow-up survey, so we did pay a survey company to come out and do this post-flood survey. We didn't have them survey in the water, and so the flood event was still, the higher flows from the event was still going through. It wasn't a flood, but it was still higher flows, and so we didn't capture the scour underneath these baskets because there was still water up to that area.
Mayor, the other question that I have is, Eric and Chris, what are your anticipated consequences that you're going to see that we're getting from homeowners and other people that are involved? Because, most of these projects are actually, it's a public-private partnership where we're going on to propose working with the private property owners.
So, the private landowners that are aware of the NRCS process, I could imagine them reaching out to the NRCS and the NRCS saying that we've rejected their projects to help private landowners, which is not necessarily true. We want to provide the support to private landowners, but, again, we need to, as the sponsor, we carry the liability, and we need to make sure that the village's vision in the comprehensive plan of the river is meeting. For us rejecting some of their structures, we're actually protecting other people around that property. If, as you look at the damage assessment, even though these gabion walls protected that one property, as soon as you go downstream, it messed up the person downstream. So we are still protecting our citizens by proposing to not accept their funds without these type of solutions that we presented.
Mayor Crawford and councilors, if I may add one thing, I've worked on multiple jurisdictions with different people from the NRCS. It is a national organization. It's broken down by states, and how each individual state, their hierarchy and how they prioritize work varies dramatically. My best experience is Colorado versus New Mexico. There's a lot of discretion. I personally am surprised that we don't have the NRCS looking at this project and saying, yes, this flood happened, we're here to help, we're gonna give you the money. And we'll work with you to work out a solution for what types of repairs are implemented that we feel are appropriate, that fit within our guidelines. We'll work with you. And to that end, when we presented our independent assessment of damages to the NRCS, Eric requested a meeting. It was held over Zoom with a number of NRCS people. We requested not only the folks that have been out here on the ground, but also the state conservation officer, conservationist, I believe. That's the highest ranking person, and the highest ranking river engineer geomorphologist from the NRCS to participate in that. Because we were presenting information about how this flood happens and the scour and the dynamics of it. We wanted technical people that had specific training in rivers to participate in that call. And unfortunately, the state conservationist said, sorry, I can't make the meeting. I have full confidence in my local staff, and they'll make the decisions for us. And so we've done within the constraints of the New Mexico system. We've tried to bring knowledgeable people into the discussion, and been relatively unsuccessful.
Mayor, the reason I bring up these issues the way that I'm bringing them up is because I believe that if we do reject this funding, we need to come out with a strong message and, object to the procedures that the NRCS is following. And it sounds like they've made some rule changes within the Federal Code of Regulations to benefit themselves and put liability on us as a village. And, I think we need to, I agree with the methodology they're talking about dispersing the energy and not confining it. And we have to, really look at what we're doing in regards to managing that river. But if we're going to reject this, I think we need to send a strong message that we're not rejecting it because we don't want the money. We're rejecting it
or need the money.
Agree on the measures, and either protest or do what we have to do to talk with our federal delegation about the application of the program, and be able to demonstrate why we feel that our methodology is more appropriate for the area.
I have a question there. First of all, is there any type of involvement with the Army Corps of Engineers? And I was just wondering if there is, and to what extent that is. The question being is that you're talking with Ray Parrish after the 2008 flood event, and the gabion baskets that were installed, that he stated that the Army Corps was not in lockstep with whoever did the NRCS, the projects at that time, and that they were saying, well, it's another government agency, they just went ahead and did these projects against what we advised or what we thought was best for the river. So is there any kind of documentation from those particular times that show the, let's just say, an opposition to what was done to whatever extent by the Army Corps at that time that might lend some sort of credence to and some weight to our argument?
So Mayor Crawford, Councilor Eby, in the documentation that I've seen, I've not seen a written down opposition to the 2008. I do know that from conversations with staff that are around here, the person who was supervising the work was not in favor of the project. And in conversations with the Army Corps, now, they're, the effort is to try to not put in hard structures and to really work yourself up to showing that, a hard structure is a last solution. You typically would show that you've explored other opportunities. But, again, the Army Corps doesn't, I don't think, scrutinizes the other federal entities to the extent that they do private applicants.
Mayor, Eric, I think the council brings up a good point, and, even if they're go through with this project, would they have to do the environmental clearance themselves? So, if they did this previously, then there was environmental consultation conducted, and we should be able to get a copy of those documents, so.
So we can do a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request for some of the documentation that we feel that we're missing from the 2008 event.
Yes, and Chris was very, very adamant about that when I was in discussion with him, because a lot of people weren't happy with aspects or visual effects of the projects that we ended up with. And that was his comments to me was.
And I've generally, talking to people, I don't think that our general population supports the gaping baskets. I think that they were just terrified after Dolly, and they didn't know what they were signing up for and what it meant for the aesthetics and the long-term effects to their property.
But it was free.
Yeah, but it was free.
Mayor, just one other thing, in addition to, I think, appealing or whatever, for lack of a better term, the rejection of this or whatnot, or their funding, I think we need to come up with a plan on how we're going to move forward in helping to restore that river. And then, as part of that, have you all reviewed from your perspective the hazard mitigation projects and the approach that are being taken by those consultants?
So Chris was actually the third-party engineer review for Moles and Corbin. So, it was like 3 years ago. That was where I first met you, I believe.
Yes, Mayor Crawford and councilors, Moles and Corbin, I know those engineers, known them for decades. In fact, one of them was my first boss in 1987, and now I'm giving him advice on how to do things in the river. Sometimes.
Mayor, the reason I bring that up, because, they were proposing a different approach at Two Rivers Park, and now we came in with a different solution, right?
Yep.
So.
Well, we got to save the trees. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, sir. I think Moles and Corbin has softened some of the structures, and at every place where the sewer line crosses the river and FEMA money is being spent to protect that sewer line in the future, they're now building these sloping ramps. At one point, their plan was to have a dam with a pour over. We pointed out that was terrible for fish passage, and there were things that were much more environmentally friendly. That's since been changed to sloping ramps. They are going to be still pretty massive structures. That's the nature of FEMA money and how that gets spent. But I think it's been somewhat softened and made more functional for the health of the river. And every location where something is proposed, we purposefully did not include that in our estimates. We mapped those locations and said, well, they're already going to do something here. We're not asking the NRCS for any help there because it's already going to get disturbed, and there'll be some new hardscape there for better or worse. So that's been taken into consideration.
Okay. John, did you have something?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we are going to reject this, but how are we going to fund it after we reject this money?
So Mayor Crawford, Councilor Cornelius, so I agree with Manager Dodge. I think we need to make one last substantial plea to the NRCS, and I think we need to get, work with Chris to develop a kind of a more technical letter to show how Chris's proposed projects do fit within the guidelines of the program. And I think we need to forward this letter on to our senators and representatives to hopefully get some political support at the federal level We probably should be reaching out to the regional conservationist in Washington DC that covers the West region, to make sure that they are aware of the actions that the New Mexico State branch is taking on these.
Can you get, like Joe said, can you get the Army Corps involved, maybe
So-
okay our project over theirs?
I mean, we can engage them. I don't think that they'll write a letter
Right.
against them, but we might also want to consider, and I cannot remember her name, but one of the deputy bureau chiefs for NMED, she is a huge proponent of natural restoration techniques, and so we might want to work with NMED and see if we can get the state to help support us, because the state, even though they don't have the same kind of jurisdiction over the Clean Water Act, they do obligate us to try to include natural solutions before we go to hardened solutions. So I think that we could probably get the support of the state in this process.
It just makes a lot of sense to do it that way.
It does.
Chris, do you have a guesstimate of what your proposal would cost versus this other?
About the same, he said earlier, I thought, wasn't it?
Well, Councilor Coughlin, Mayor Crawford, pardon me. I just will say that the first proposal that came from the NRCS was $2 million for the total project. We went through and came up with an estimate of 1.4 million, and that included everything. It included walls where the NRCS wanted to put them, and we thought that was a good idea, and everything else I've shown you today.
Okay.
And contingency and costs for engineering and permitting, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
Personally, I think we could implement a scaled-back project and address the worst places first and do it in a progressive fashion. I don't think it's an all or nothing. In fact, some of the, even again, next to those gabion walls that we looked at earlier, the solution I showed you on screen is the full Monty, but I think we can do perhaps a scaled back version of that and let nature bring us the sediment instead of us filling it all in on our own nickel. I mean, there's ways in which we can implement this a little slower. So initially, you were being asked to pay $500,000 for something that wasn't exactly clear where, and it was going to be a lot more hardscape. If you spent that $500,000 on a more natural approach, I think you're going to be surprised how much you get for that. And perhaps we can spend a lot less, but do it in an incremental fashion.
What about easements and things like that? Was that figured into your estimate?
No.
Because we've learned a lot about easements.
Yep.
No matter how good it looks and smells.
And, you know, some of it is demonstrating the personal benefits that a property owner will get by giving us a easement, a no-cost easement for these projects. So that would be incorporated into our strategy. You know, we don't want to spend all of our money paying for easements for these projects.
And what if the property's owned on both sides by this individual? Does that not have any?
Mayor, I believe the approach is we'd have to set up some type of grant program to work with them. And, you know, we would address, because it would be improvements on private property.
Right.
So, you know, for a river restoration project, I think we could, you know, come up with an approach that would address the easement issues and in lieu of grant and whatnot, so.
Especially since, you know, the anti-donation and the no access to the river by the public and all the other aspects. And the naturalists, wouldn't they say, let it be? You know, it was flood, it's nature, just let her go.
Well, unfortunately, since there's already development along the river, we're past that point. There's more harm that would occur from just letting it be.
Because we've had people to say they shouldn't have done it in the first place.
So, you know, if we could go back in time 120 years and tell people to put a buffer around the river, that would have been the best solution for Rodolso in the long run. But it's pretty hard to go back on that.
Yep. Gotta go forward.
So, Chris and I will work on a letter, and then, if you guys choose to take action next week for us to, reject the funds, we'll have a letter prepared.
And please identify the parties that the manager talked about that maybe we need to reach out and contact, and, and just everything in New Mexico is political, everything. And so it's a little distraught that we're supposed to be such an environmentally friendly state, and then we see things like this that's to the contrary. So it makes me believe that there's somebody's, has a concrete plan, or a brother in the business, or whatever you want to call it, but it just doesn't seem right, so.
Mayor, Eric, what was the date that we needed to respond by?
It will be the 14th, that's, next week, Friday.
Mayor, I think we need to consider rejection with, objection to their process.
Right. Yeah, not say no, just here's an alternative, that we would,
A natural
Yeah.
alternative for the health of our river.
and I think you could include the public sentiment of the people's reaction to the pink concrete, because we hear about it still today.
Yeah, but from their side, if I were me on the other side, okay, we'll change the color. What color do you want? That's not a big deal, but.
Well, it's the fake concrete, it's not natural, the gunite, just call it Stonecrete or whatever, Blowcrete, Shotcrete.
It's basically when they build a swimming pool. That's what they use for the understructure before they plaster it.
I think it's ugly.
Okay.
So, before we end this presentation, I just want to point out that there is some other funding solutions that we might pursue if we can't go through with the EWP. I've listed a few. The FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities might be an avenue for us to work with the New Mexico Department of Homeland Security to implement a project. We're going to be implementing a River Stewardship Fund project on Two Rivers Park, but a lot of these structures could be something that we might pursue under that fund. Once we finish our watershed-based plan with the New Mexico Environmental Department, we'll open the potential for EPA Section 319 funds, which is meant to help reduce impairment for streams. And so the Rodolso has an impairment for turbidity, E. coli, temperature, phosphorus, and nitrogen. And so putting plantings along the river is going to help out with temperature. Reducing erosion is going to help with turbidity. A lot of phosphorus issues can also come from natural sources. So if we're stirring up a bunch of sediment, we're putting more phosphorus in the water. So all of these projects would likely be eligible for that fund. There's also a new Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Environmental Water Resources Program that just started up this year that we could potentially put in an application for it next year. And then we could also put in a disaster assistance program request with the state, since we do have an active disaster from the July flood event.
Well, Tim's always talking about the shovel-ready programs, and we've already gone through all of the studies and everything. Hopefully, we could show these other people that we've done our due diligence and we're ready to restore the river.
Yeah, and Chris has a pretty rough preliminary design that he could flesh out pretty easy, and it might be something that could be eligible for some of these federal infrastructure dollars that are coming down. So I think there's still some opportunities for us to explore. I think the main thing, though, is let's try to see if we can bring the NRCS back and run this through the EWP.
Okay, anything else?
That was a great presentation.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys allowing Chris to present during the workshop meeting. He's not available for the
Next week.
council meeting, but I will be available for any follow-up questions that you guys have.
Okay, All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Chris, nice meeting you.
Item number 10 is discussion on award of IFB number 2022-001B, contract with Beartooth Jetting and Video Inspection LLC for Grindstone Canyon Dam Seepage Gallery Drain Cleaning Restoration Project in the amount of $430,865.56, including gross receipts tax. Hi, guys, you're back.
Hello.
Hi, Mayor, Councilors. This discussion is on the award of the RFP that you just mentioned, to go to Pure Technologies, US Inc., DBA, no, that's the wrong one. Beartooth, yes. The IFB 2022-001B. And the contract to go to Beartooth Jetting and Video Inspection LLC for the Grindstone Canyon Dam Seepage Gallery Drain Cleaning Restoration Project for the amount that you mentioned above. The legal ads that we placed were in the 3 newspapers, and we did the Rodolso News, the El Paso Times, and this one we also did the Denver Post. There were 9 firms that followed up and downloaded the IFB, and we did have a Zoom pre-bid meeting on December 26th at 2 p.m. And we did have 4 addendas in which one of them, the bid due date was extended from November 23rd to December 15th.
You said you had the video on December 26th?
The Zoom meeting.
On the Sunday? I was just curious.
That's what I thought too. Maybe the Monday, huh? The 27th.
Seventh,
On a
maybe?
Tuesday,
It was on a Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay, so that'd be
So
the
that would be
28th or the
28th.
21st. Okay.
And we did receive 3 proposals and deemed them responsive, but we did also receive the engineer's recommendation to go to the Beartooth Water Jetting.
Okay. And we'll get the spelling right. Is it B-E-A-R or B-A-R-E? Like, I'm bare naked
I think
or
it's
I'm a mean bear?
B-E-A-R.
B-E-A-R?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Go right ahead.
Randy, is this just something that we have to do ever so often? Does it mean that we have seepage in the dam, or do we always have seepage?
Yeah, we always have seepage in the dam, and the reason we're doing this is it's, a lot of the drains are plugged up, and I guess the hydrostatic pressure increases, and it's gonna be done probably periodically, maybe every 5 years or so, whatever James Head dictates. But this is an ongoing item from years back that we're trying to correct. And it was notated in the inspections also. But it's a big item, and it's real important, to James. So if we get this taken care of, it's really gonna go a long way.
Who's Jane?
James D. Head.
James Head.
Yeah, he's the one that does the inspections for both dams.
So every 5 years, we'll have to spend almost $500,000?
Well, this is a combination of a few items in the project. They're gonna slope the inside of the drain, or the inside of the floor, so we can get proper drainage, and then, decrease the amount of water that's gonna be in there. They're gonna have to modify some of the humps and stuff, so there's gonna be some work there.
Which that's all original from the building of the
Yes.
dam back in the 80s, so.
They're trying to get it to channel on one side. That way, we don't have 3 feet or a couple feet of standing water. Because in certain areas, when you go in, it gets real deep. And then the other thing is, there was that old existing pipe that's in the gallery. That's also going to be removed. They're also going to put in a weir, right in the portal, so that they get the exact flow before and after to see, you know, the difference. And then the other thing is the inspections. We're gonna do, drain inspections, camera work before and after.
How's this gonna impact the level of water in the lake, any?
I don't think it's gonna affect it at all, you know. I mean, it's just the amount of water that's seeping through, which, you know, we track that.
Randy, didn't we do something similar to this a while back as far as the cleaning goes? I remember something came before us, but I don't remember how long ago that was.
Well, I know they did some cleaning, you know, I think with Adam's group, you know, years back before I got here. But as far as this, it hasn't ever been cleaned. I mean, we've done inspections and stuff.
I seem to remember there was
What I
something.
recall, it was just the galley. They were power washing everything and getting
Right.
as much of the calcium off there
Okay.
in the galley and.
But this way, it's, you know, we got the right contractor to do the work. The reason why the project came in probably lower than the other two bidders is this is their forte, this is what they do. And they don't have to subcontract everything. Everything's gonna be performed by Beartooth.
Right.
So that cut the costs, you know, quite a bit. So, and these guys are, you know, they're pretty solid. You know, and I'm kinda glad they were awarded the bid, you know.
Where's the money gonna come from?
GRT.
General fund?
SGRT.
SGRT. Okay. And it's already there?
I believe he has some monies budgeted, but in the financial impact, there's, a couple of options, because there will have to be, budget added to his current amount, because I think it was a little bit short based on what we had originally estimated, so I just need to know which option to pick. I think I said from reserves, right?
Yes. There's adequate budget in SGRT cash reserves to cover the additional cost. So it just need a budget adjustment.
Yeah, BCR.
He has about 272,000 right now.
Okay.
And we didn't know exactly what the price was gonna come in at, so.
Well, and I like the fact that there's some modifications going to be done that will be long-lasting. It's not just go in and clean it, and we're going to clean it again in a few years, so.
That's right.
And the other thing we did is we, instead of trying to do some of the stuff in-house, we just, did a total turnkey project. You know, gave it all to them and maybe makes it a little bit easier.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, I had sent that back, Judy, on the financial impact when you did it, and then I guess you added the other options. Did you look at the increase of SGRT as well, or did you just go off the budgeted
I
amounts?
just had enough in the budget, and that usually is the easiest, but we do, right now, currently on GRT, we are over, or pretty close to, meeting budget as far as the percentage on half the year, we're a little bit ahead. So there could be an extra option of increasing SGRT revenues and including the expenditure also.
So, Mayor, we'll evaluate that and give the council that recommendation as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not really seeing any other options.
When we look at what we're talking about, Council, and I don't think it was included, you know, the budgeted amount that they're basing that financial impact off was the budgeted amount of SGRTs that we projected.
Okay.
Since then, GRTs and SGRTs have been producing right about 17% higher than what were projected. So, you know, there should be some additional funds that Judy could look at within SGRT revenues for this year that may cover that gap instead of having to go to the general fund.
That's what I would prefer, all out of SGRT.
And SGRT cash revenues. And is it up to what number within SGRT itself?
That's what I'm saying, you got that budgeted amount, but SGRT has been producing just a GRT higher, so we need to evaluate what that looks like.
So there's additional income coming in, we don't have to pull from the reserves.
But I wasn't gonna pull from general fund.
You're pulling from SGRT reserve?
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't see that financial impact back there.
Oh.
Is your microphone on?
Like I was saying, I didn't see that financial impact after I had sent it back. So I'm not sure if you're pulling from SGRT reserve or from general fund reserve.
Regular.
Regular.
And there's a full scope of work, I suppose. I haven't read this whole bid form that explains all the different things that you were talking about, and it's all in here.
Yeah, in the agreement.
So I'll have to look at that.
And
Well, I
this
was
one-
looking under the bid report. I didn't see it in the agreement about actually scope of work and all that. Is it in the agreement checklist? It just,
In the agreement itself, the first section is the work, and it lists what all they're going to
I
do.
guess my agreement must be different than yours. Mine's just a checklist, agreement checklist
It's the first,
and the agreement. Okay.
the agreement is the first attachment.
Mayor, just, for clarification, getting back to Councilor Letterman's, question, some of this restoration isn't gonna be annual or even, frequently completed, it's restoration. Some of the cleaning is gonna continue to be frequent. So,
Yeah, the other stuff, like the pipe removal and the grading is, one-time deal.
After that, we're going to get Randy a pressure washer, and he can just go down.
Yeah.
Be a lot easier.
A little bit every week, you get it done.
But I mean, it just says, what is positive slope? I mean, where's because we always get in this stuff, well, to get the positive slope, we're gonna need more money for this, that, or the other. I'm just saying, do we have the specification of what, uniform and, the grade to the gallery floor and uniform positive slope by excavating high spots? What are the specifications of that?
I mean, what
Is
they
that gonna
did
be
is-
in here?
Yeah, and what they did is, they did a survey.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in, I think it was Sauter Miller. They came in and did a complete survey. They identified all the high spots and all the areas.
So where is this PVC? That's some of the questions. Where's it at? Is it in the dam? Is it before the dam in the water? Is it coming out of the dam? How's this PVC? I'm just not understanding
I
it.
guess what they did is, years ago, to try to create a ventilation system, they hung it inside the gallery up on top, and then over a course of time, I think it just fell and it landed on the floor, so. And that's a lot of pipe, and it's a pretty good diameter, so.
That doesn't make me clear. It's nothing. Is it you? Does that explain it all to you? I mean, I just don't understand what we're doing. And
Seeing pipe, if it was suspended
it's
up here
down.
and it fell down, that means it broke.
then
Yeah, they
so
just
what's,
had it strapped to.
I know,
to the
but,
roof,
so was water going through it at one time?
No, this was before my time, but the way they had it set up, I think, was some kind of positive ventilation
Oh, just for air,
for air, that's it.
to keep
Do
it
we
from being
need it?
moldy or whatever.
Do we need it? The
No, that's
ventilation?
why they're gonna remove it. They're just pulling it out and.
I know
So
we
when
don't
they-
need it on the floor, but do we need it for ventilation?
No.
No.
Okay, so when they say remove from the floor, it's not jackhammering it out of the floor, it just fell on the floor.
Fell on.
Okay, that's why I was having a hard time.
And it's kind of, when you walk in, it's, I think it's only like 6 feet wide and, it's, and it
It's been years
curves and
since I've been in there.
it's kind of a nuisance and a safety factor.
Sure.
Having it on the floor. So what we looked at is, since we're in there cleaning it and doing the correct slope, we should get it removed also.
Do you have any pictures of this?
That's the next thing that would
I
probably.
sure do.
That would be helpful for us to understand, because we're probably all have
I mean,
different visions.
That's
in
what
our
I'm
heads
saying,
of what we're
when I read
talking
the
about.
scope of work and even on the other portion, it doesn't explain to me in my mind what it is, because to clean the vertical and horizontal dam foundation relief drains. So that's below ground to me. That's below the water level.
Low and then up on the roof.
So how do you get the pressure? Go ahead.
Mayor Crawford, councilors, I just want to remind you that the agreement here just has a short synopsis. So this was a bid packet that was put together. There's a comprehensive manual that goes through all of the details. They've mapped out all the drains that they can see. We compared it to the original construction designs of there, and we've shown where most of the drains were in the original construction. We couldn't find them all in the surveys. But we do have all of those details in a comprehensive specification. But the agreement that you have in front of you is just a short synopsis, so you can kind of see the general nature of the project. And so we can include that specification if you guys want to look at it in that detail. It talks about the concrete specification for patching portions of the floor and how to chisel out portions of it to make positive flow and how to pressure out the drains. If you guys want to look at that, we can definitely provide that to you.
Well, if we had some pictures to kind of just tell us how the process is being done, because every time we got into situations, more money, it's that we didn't understand. We needed to ask more questions and specifications on what was going to be done actually. And when we're talking about the pipe in the floor, I was thinking in the floor, but it's just laying on the floor.
Correct.
And so,
And you know, Randy has some videos of the gallery. The gallery is not a hospitable area. You have to wear SCBA. It's a hazard to be in there. So it's not a real great.
but when we're talking about jetting, what are we talking about the rest of the time? We're talking about we're putting high pressure water in our sewer lines and blowing them out. So how they getting the jet in there, and then where are they blowing it out to?
Yeah, we can provide some.
So they don't have to go in the water to blow it out.
So they're just gonna use a pressure washer and they're gonna basically drill through the existing borehole. So it shouldn't damage the concrete, it's just gonna take out the calcium. And the pressure jet will go down, it'll be kind of like a drill bit, but it'll bring up the material.
Oh,
They specify how much pressure is
And
needed
so then there's
to
a
achieve it. So.
filtration system that will take out the particles, and then that water will go into the Grindstone Canyon, and then it will go down through our wetlands, and then we'll pump the water back up to the Grindstone Reservoir.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot involved on this project, and I mean, everything was pretty well thought out.
So, we can prepare a short presentation with a couple photos to show you.
I would appreciate, just for my naivety, that I would have a better understanding of how it's going to work.
Yeah, if you've ever been inside that gallery, it's kind of
Yeah, it's spooky,
spooky. I mean,
wet and drippy, and
we always keep the monitors, and what I did also was I tracked the air at each location for a whole year, and I submitted that to James Head. And the oxygen level never fell below 20.3. So, I mean, it was good all the way to the end. It's a confined space because of the limited egress and then the engulfment. I
Yep.
mean, and then if your light ever goes out, you're SOL because it's pure dark.
and you know how I am about acronyms. What does the SOL mean?
Sugar out of luck.
Simply out of luck. So, Mayor, to Eric's comment about providing us the information, for everybody, my personal opinion is I would rather have too much information than not enough. It seems like far too often we're given synopsises or small little bits of information, and then there's a lot of questions that come out of it.
And then there's
So-
something later that comes that if I'd have known.
Yeah, and especially now, since we're not printing out getting those 800-page, things every month, and it's all electronic, put everything you can into these packages. So if we don't want to look at it, we'll just skip over it. It's no harm, no foul. But as much information as we can get helps us, because then questions that come up or questions that come up from constituents or whatever, we can kind of refer to it maybe, and then, with somewhat sounding intelligent.
This project was engineered.
Yes.
Randy didn't make up all this stuff, which may have been all
I
right
mean, we
anyway.
did a lot
But-
of documentation, and we did a lot of looking at different items. We even went in with a jackhammer, a portable one, to see how hard it was gonna be to remove the calcium buildup on the floor. And then we even took video of it and sent it.
And I would
to the
assume
engineers.
that, but there's nothing in here that says that you went through all that work.
Yeah.
So if somebody just reads this, it's like, they're just gonna go down with a pressure washer and go, psh, and
No,
that's gonna be
it's-
it.
And having Beartooth on on this project. I mean, this is what they do for a living. They do the jetting and the video inspections, so I'm glad they're on.
Well,
board.
we've had several engineering firms over the years that this is what they do for a living, and they boned us out of about $4 million. So that's all I'm saying is that we just want, I've perused this. I haven't read the whole 227 pages of it, and it goes specifically, but there's some things in my mind's eye that I don't understand because I haven't seen what they're talking about. I just would feel more comfortable if we had a few photos, and I know you've done a lot of the background work on it, but I wasn't aware of all of it until now. And all I hear about is Ye and Associates, checking the dam, and I knew we were going to be doing something. So when we spend this $400,000 and whatever, I'd just like to know what we're getting, what work we're doing, so that when we come around in 5 years, it's like, didn't we just do this? Or the next council or the next people can ask those questions. But I haven't read all of it, but what I've read is it's pretty standard stuff that there has been a lot of done. But if we could just figure out what our minds are, a few pictures, and then once we straightened out the pipe in the floor, on the floor, what that meant, that cleared up a lot for me. Didn't figure it
that
out.
kind of happened before in my time, but that's what it looked like, that they were trying to prevent or set up some kind of ventilation.
And then before the contract, we'll have the surety bond and all that stuff lined out and make sure, because I'm not questioning their capabilities. I'm questioning my capability to understand what we're doing exactly. As a fiduciary of public money and whatnot, I just would feel better.
If anybody would like to come see the gallery sometime, let me know, and I'd be glad to give them a tour.
Yeah.
Do you provide the waiters?
And a raincoat.
Be a fit test and everything else, so.
Yeah, it's.
Do you provide
But
the
I mean,
waiters,
we could
Randy?
at least show them the entrance to the portal, or portal entrance, and not take them all the way through, so.
It's like a scene from the movie Alien or something when they're on the ship, and that stuff's dripping down and there's more room in the movie than there is in this thing. So
They said one time before they had the actual gate installed, they were coming up to, a bear came out from inside, and everybody was like.
So, and that's the only thing is let's make sure we understand, is it BEA, because it's all different through different, and some of the information I've got, it's BAR? BER?
Beartooth.
Okay, because on some of it, we have it as naked tooth, so. Okay, all right, well, thank you. Any other questions?
Nope.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it. And we'll have that on regular. Possible action on change order number 4 with Smithco Construction, Inc. for Alto Crest Water Treatment Plant, Plant 3, Rehabilitation Project, GO 1709, requesting an extension of 50 calendar days to April 5th, 2022, and increasing the contract amount by $37,009.53, including gross receipts tax. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is some of the conditions that were found when they started doing the actual installation and tying in all the equipment and stuff. This is basically to modify and provide additional programming and wiring required to make the plant fully functional and automated. There was some discrepancies, and we spent a lot of time on this one issue since it is the final phase of the project. It is the most critical, and it's pretty complex, and we held probably 4 or 5 meetings. We even actually brought the engineer down from Mosen and Corbin so we could all look at it and have a meeting and go through everything, because certain people had different understandings on how it worked and how it should work. And then, when we operators and everybody looked at it, we identified a problem and we brought it up, and I don't know, it's a tough one, but.
So it's one of those things that we engineered it, we looked at it, and then, I'm not calling into question, your intellect, even though you're wearing the Minnesota Vikings hat, and we love, I understand that. So this is something after we got into it that it became
Correct. And then
apparent.
when you have a retrofit, it's a lot of unknowns, and I guess even, doing this building.
Oh, sure.
There was a lot of things that crop up, and you
Right.
don't really expect it, and you don't really see every item until you actually get in and start, working.
Right on.
But it does seem like that, that's why we have our engineers and,
Well-
and our experts and then we end up having to pay.
What I also did, is I brought, we had like 4 or 5 meetings, and we looked at all kinds of alternatives, and we tried to come up with a solution to eliminate this change order. I worked real hard on trying to do that, and, we were able to, we went back and forth on all the ideas, and a lot of meetings and a lot of headaches on this one issue, and,
I think it's important that we do it the best way, but you would think
and
that
that's
they
what we
would know.
determined, because we didn't wanna, undercut it, or we wanted a real good product, and so far, everything is really coming into play. This is the final piece, and one other thing is, this is not a typical treatment plant, that they deal with, since we
Mayor,
have a commingle line and.
Mayor, Randy, I think the bottom line when you did the evaluation that you explained to Eric and I is that you provided the engineer as-built. And when those as-built, since the time that those as-built were provided, there was changes to the plans.
Exactly.
And then they developed the plans off of your as-built and didn't realize that the changes that occurred. So that was the.
The nut and bolts part
Yes.
right there. Yeah, so a lot of the regulations changed through the from 45 years ago. They made more the NTUs stricter, made it more stringent, and so therefore, a lot of changes were made, like Manager Dodge mentioned, and that's kind of where we're at.
Well, I'm one that normally looks at these things, and I'm the first to complain about overages. And, I want to commend Molson Corbin on the letter with their justification for it. I think they did a really good job, and I love the one paragraph here about how the industry standard contingency is 5%, but this is less than 1%, trying to justify it. But, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. They're looking at plans, and once you open things up, you just don't know what's there. So to me, this is all justified, believe it or not. So,
It's better to do it the best way.
yeah, I don't have a
And
problem.
that was our goal, is to, to have a real good final product, and, it's been complex, but we worked through most of these items, and this is the final piece to the project.
It's like doing a remodel on a house. You can't see what's behind the drywall until you take the drywall off.
So this should be finished in April?
Yes, and let me see,
22nd.
May 20th.
May 20th?
Yeah, the finals are the substantial, I think, from February 14th to March 31st, and then final completion from April 14th to May 20th, 2022.
Did they get all the electrical all figured out? I remember my last visit, you're running more power to somewhere.
Yeah, we were able to get pretty much everything completed. I mean, they did wire up the new pancake valves or the actuators, and so they did get that problem all solved.
Okay.
I mean, there's been a lot of little bitty problems that just keep coming up, but we're tackling them one by one. And even with the total cost, even with this change order, it only comes up to $55,244.61 of change orders 1 through 4. So that's pretty decent on a $3.5 million project. That's a retrofit.
I'm good with consent, if you guys are. Whatever you.
Fine with me.
Okay,
That's fine with me too.
consent?
Yep.
Thank you, Randy.
You bet.
Number 12, discussion on proposal from Advanced Tower Services, Inc. for labor and materials to erect a new 190-foot self-supporting communication tower at the Horton complex in the amount of $168,034.75, plus gross receipts tax. And Chief, I see you've recovered fully and you're looking GQ'd as usual, so glad to have you back. You feeling 100%? No?
The energy,
No, what?
energy level is, hit and miss. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the
Turned it
weirdest
on and
part
then off.
No. That's been the weirdest part of the whole process, was getting the energy back. But, I'm glad to be back and, present this. So, the proposal that you see is for the 190-foot tower that's going to go in for the communications for the entire Horton project, which will be able to adequately dispatch police, fire, and any of our utility resources or anything that we need to dispatch out of there. The 190-foot tower will adequately host any future development there. If we go into a more detailed consolidation of the county. The $168,034.75 is the proposal, including the cost for the back order and those types of things. Whenever this project first started, we had one proposal, but obviously prices of metal and materials have gone up, but that will cover it adequately. As far as the financial impact with it, this is not an expenditure that is in the current budget, and there's a few options that were listed in that, as far as the cash reserves in the SURF, or from cash reserves from general fund, or the GRT, with 66% of the budgeted revenues with the half year that gone, the increase to the budget could be completed to include the expenditure. So I'm coming before you to present this.
If we could get a plat or what of location of where it's being put up.
Yes, sir, I can get all that information for you and get it emailed out to
I
you.
appreciate that.
Yes, sir, not a problem.
So Chief, is there anything that's not included in this that we're gonna come back later and say, oh, well, we still have this to do, or this turnkey? I see that it includes the installation of antennas and lines. So will we have that equipment available for them to install when they're doing it?
So this will actually include the mounting the hardware to the generator and then the alternate power supply if we do need to use the alternate power supplies with it. Some of those questions Zeke has been working with Advanced, and I believe that everything has been covered as far as the erection of the tower and all of the bells and whistles that go along with powering it, plus the alternative power sources if we need to flip that switch.
There's some
Mayor,
drainage issues. There's some drainage issues, Zeke said, that isn't addressed in this, but he's gonna take care of it, I guess.
Mayor and council, what I can do is, during the manager's report, I can have Zeke do a complete report. Because the tower's handled separate, the generator's separate, there's different elements of what we're dealing with. And last week in the project meeting, that's one of the items that Catlin was bringing up, is the coordination with the different suppliers. So there's probably, I would say, about 6 different moving parts to this. And we can do a complete explanation and presentation to the council at the regular meeting.
Because I know they're going to be installing our antennas and stuff that we already have. So are they going to have to be taken down from somewhere?
Excuse
It says installation of customer-provided antennas and lines. Are those antennas and lines currently in use somewhere?
No, sir, it'll all be brand new
stuff.
hardware. Yep, whenever it goes in, when it gets installed.
Is that stuff that we received with the money, the grant money on the,
Part of the hardware will be paid for by the Department of Finance. That is funded with some of the agreements that we've already received authorization for, but the actual tower itself was not covered in that price.
Yeah, and Manager Dodge, as you implied the coordination, I know I spoke with John with White Sands, I was talking with him about something else, and he was telling me he needs to get an air conditioner unit up on the roof, but this tower could impede his ability to get that up. So that definitely needs to really get all those pieces in line there.
Okay,
I know I've asked this before, and I know that we're not building this for, in case the sheriff, Lincoln County Sheriff, comes on board with our consolidated dispatch. But we wouldn't have to, if they decided to, we wouldn't have to do anything else?
No.
Okay.
unless they paid for it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that they have to pay for, but the 190-foot tower would be adequate to be able to dispatch anywhere.
Mayor and Counselor, to evaluate the whole system countywide, there's a study that would have to be conducted, a telemetry study. And, there may be additional repeaters, and then anytime you build this type of a system, you want to include in redundancy. And what I mean by that is if one part goes down, you want to be able to rely on a different piece to make sure that you have good coverage. So if we were to consider, and I know that the board did, take an action to do some type of feasibility study.
Right.
But, in my opinion, a complete telemetry study needs to be conducted with recommendations of building redundancy as well.
Okay.
Well, and then here's an opportunity for Rodney to have a platform built on there and do some bungee jumping.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I'm surprised he hadn't brought that up already.
Rock wall or something.
Or tying it and having a zip line somewhere. Okay, so what, regular, you wanted to talk about this one?
Yes, let's talk about it, because I know every time we put up cellular towers, people come out of the woodwork on that, so this might be a good thing. So we don't get after the fact. It's like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on?
I agree. Okay, item number 13, thank you, Chief. Glad you're on the mend.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Hanson is discussion on the contract with Hope Floats Addiction Counseling LLC to provide individual and group domestic violence offender treatment in the amount not to exceed $10,000.
Mayor, Bertha, if you can please note to put that under the manager's report.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Crawford and council, this is an additional MOU. We'd put 2 last month. And this, like I said, I had contacted all of the counseling providers in Lincoln County, and this one was a little late getting into me, but it is basically the same MOU as we did last month, except that these MOUs had been sent to Santa Fe for review by the insurance people, and also it was reviewed by our legal department, and some changes were made. I do not have a copy of the contract, even this contract that has been, those changes have been added to, but y'all are supposed to have it. I never did receive it, but.
Again, what was it we were supposed to receive?
The 2 contracts that we did last month. Were approved with some changes, and those changes were made, and there was some questions about the insurance, the amount of insurance that the people would need, and the contracts were reviewed by the insurance people in Santa Fe and our legal department, and changes were made in that area, and I have not received those.
I believe we received them, did we not? I have to ask Ron.
I presume that y'all had the contract with the changes, and this contract also should have the changes in it.
Okay, I will find out here after this meeting. Because it seems like I read through those and there were highlighted portions. Okay. And I was just looking, if it seemed like I wasn't paying attention, I was trying to figure out where 615 Sutter Drive was. That's up here to the right?
No, it's down there, that old Charleston Plaza
Where's that at?
or something like that. It's right before the stoplight at Paradise Canyon. On
Right.
the right-hand side, there's that motel,
Mm-hmm.
and then this.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. That was a new one for me.
That's where they had the AA meetings and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Mayor Bertha, you got some information?
Ron has the contracts, he was still getting the attorney from the league, to
Okay.
figure it out, but I haven't received it as well.
Okay.
He's working on it forward.
So then what we have, is this current or is this still subject to whatever changes or whatever?
I think it's subject to changes. So by the meeting time, we'll have the current one.
Okay.
Because I haven't received
So-
it either, so I'll get with Ron on that and make sure that that all of them consist of all the changes.
Or I should say, by the time the agenda is posted, the current one will be on there.
Yeah, I'm assuming this has the changes, because like workers' compensation is now 100,000, I believe the old one was 10,000.
Yep.
So,
The only thing I saw highlighted was the not to exceed.
And Mayor, I'm a little bit confused on this. I thought it was approved with the proposed changes. So,
It was.
It shouldn't be coming back.
well, on the old ones.
Yes.
But then whatever that changes were, should roll forward into all contracts, and this is a new contract. So this one, Zach, do you know, is this, have the changes incorporated into it?
I don't know what you guys are looking at, but Ron sent these off to self-insurers for their general counsel to look at. He sent back just some general comments that I looked over with Ron yesterday that, I mean, I took some of his comments and incorporated them and then did not incorporate some of the other ones. So I don't know if Ron, that was just yesterday, if you guys are looking at what we did. But again, they weren't specific to the contract that's being presented right now, other than that, the change to the workers' comp. And then just some minor little things.
Mayor, we'll work through it internally and get the council the updated contracts with the updated terms and conditions.
Okay. Because I do see the changes on the insurance and.
One thing that I noticed in this that I thought y'all might have a question about was the rate schedule. It gives several different rates for different treatment process, different things like mental health assessment, mental health individual sessions, and that these rates are per hour. And that's not, it doesn't state that, but they are per hour. And then down at the bottom, it says per unit, which is 30 minutes. So that would be $30 per hour for group sessions and individual peer support and so forth.
But you said earlier this was pretty much in line with the other ones.
They're all a little different, but they're all pretty close.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Do you want this on regular?
Do we need it on regular?
I mean, we just need to verify that what we agreed to last time with the changes that they were incorporated in and that this one meets that.
Yeah, Mayor, since we don't have it clarified, I would recommend regular.
Okay. Regular it is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Because the only two comments I made was insurance and then the fee schedule on the one, and it looks like this new agreement has all that taken care of.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item 14 is our standard Discussion on lease agreement between the Village of Ruidoso and Randy Boggs for T-Hangar Charlie 13, located at Sierra Blanca Regional Airport, beginning on December 10th, 2021. Yes, sir, gentlemen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. So Mr. Boggs came in and he was entered in on the 10th day of December for this lease agreement. It's going to be $250 a month, and that'll be paid on the 25th day of each month. And that's just going to continue to bring in profits for the airport.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Anybody else consent?
Consent.
15 is first renewal agreement with Avfuel Corporation. Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, on April 1st, 2017, an aviation fuel supply agreement was awarded to Avfuel Corporations by the Village of Ruidoso. The term of the agreement was for 5 years with 3 one-year renewals. It is our understanding that the Village of Ruidoso desires to extend the agreement until March 31st, 2023. So this will be our first renewal. It's going to allow us to continue fuel-related operations at Sierra Blanca Regional Airport. So we'll be able to continue to buy and resell fuel, which is where we get a majority of our profits from, as well as be able to contact our area manager, Trent Reeder, for any kind of repair questions we have on our trucks, anything related to that.
Okay. We talked at one time, we're not even considering self-fueling anymore, so.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
The only question I have, and it's probably for Zach, is this is a document that looks like it was provided by Avfuel. In a renewal, don't we want to have our document rather than one provided by the vendor?
I think if it's been, we've done it before where they've been reviewed.
I'm just used to all agreements are something that's issued by that I can remember are always issued by the village.
Not the one with the AT&T on the cell phone tower, and the one on the the Windstream was a modified document where we read and then we would add things or discuss things. So I suppose that this one was done the same way.
We have contracts with copy machine companies, just thinking off the top of my head, other contracts that I reviewed that I didn't write, so.
Right. If you're good with it, I'm fine. I just remember everything else we get seems to be, well, especially with the airport, it's documents that are being generated internally that are coming to us, may have input or may have wording from the vendor, but this just caught me in a weird way and just said, wait a minute, this is coming from the vendor. So I'm good.
Okay, do we want to?
Consent.
Consent, okay. All right, thanks, gentlemen. Before we go, we'd ask about, after the little thing that happened out there, that we were going to talk and review all the hangars and find out how many people were either not following guidelines that were living out there full-time, things like that. Have we done that?
There's none of them at this point in time living out there full-time. The incident that occurred out there, she's been in Florida since the incident happened. She hasn't.
But how does she even own it? That's the question I want. She's not on there anywhere. It's the king.
Correct.
So how is she supposed to be, because of what I was told by JD, she purchased half of it. We don't have that anywhere, so she's.
We don't have that. So we're, Zach could review that. We need to just get a hold of.
Send her a letter.
And let them know that that's not going to be.
Okay.
What do you mean live?
We have people that have little apartments out there that were initially meant when they'd fly in, they'd have a place to do their whatever, but we've had people that live out there all summer.
I did not.
Yeah, and
There's a few hangars that are that way that have living quarters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did not know.
Well,
that.
Hubbard's old one had one. This one has one. That is Hubbard's
Place for
old
the
one.
pilots to.
Johnny Vincent used to have one.
Yeah.
Goss has
And
living quarters.
There was also an issue that came up with people storing stuff
Yep.
in their hangars that aren't aviation related. Has that been addressed?
On the T hangars, yes, the regular hangars, they use them for their planes and other storage, so that's something that we need to really address to see how we need to handle that. I know that people have some RVs in some of them, but they also store their planes in them, so They come in, they fly, sometimes some of them fly in, take their
Get
RV.
in the RV and go.
So, and they have cars in them, so when they fly in, they have vehicles to use when they're here.
Yeah, and I think that's related. Ones I was getting to is that, you know, the one guy told me he got rid of his storage buildings in town and he used his storage junk out there and he didn't even have a plane. That's since he's gone now. I just didn't know if there were any
$250 a
more.
month, it's cheaper to rent a T hangar and put all your junk in it rather than it is.
And all the
get
T
storage.
hangers, from what I understand, they're all being used appropriately. Our regular T hangers, they are.
Okay. Well, I think we still need to take care of that one issue and send her a letter to let her know that's not acceptable, but you're gonna have to talk to the Kings to find out, you know, just because they sold half of it, we don't recognize that. It says plainly in our agreement that it has to be approved by management council, so.
I need to take a quick break.
Okay. All right. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
And I guess Ron's not here, so Bertha, what else do you have that you're gonna need on there?
I didn't run the regular meeting, but we just have a couple of presentations and we don't have no public hearings.
Bertha, could you turn your mic on?
Mayor, we do have a need for executive session.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we do have a closed session this morning with 3 items. As far as the regular meeting, we don't have any public hearings that I can remember. I just came in here all of a sudden, so I didn't bring it with me.
Okay, talk more into the microphone, because I'm
Yes.
having a hard time hearing.
Sorry. I'm trying to see everybody. So for the regular meeting, we'll have the presentation by Zeke Greer on the communications tower, and then any other presentations that they will add. We'll have the new employees.
Some reappointments.
Yes, and then possibly some reappointments, but there is no public hearings to my recollection.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's,
Okay. Well, then we'll go into closed session.
yes.
So I need a motion to go into closed session today.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we move into closed session for discussion of limited personnel matters citing 1015-1H2 NMSA 1978. Also discussion subject to the attorney-client privilege pertaining to threatened or pending litigation in which the Village of Ruidoso is or may become a participant, citing 1015-1H7 NMSA 1978. And finally, discussion of the purchase, acquisition, and/or disposal of real property and/or water rights by the Village of Ruidoso, citing 1015-1H8 NMSA 1978. Further, any action taken as a result of the closed session will be brought back into open session, and I so move.
Second.
Roll call, please. Bertha?
Sir, Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Coughlin,
Aye.
Counselor Cornelius,
Aye.
Counselor Salas,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
Counselor Eby. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're now going into closed session.
Judy, I might call you in.
So you're keeping Jackson on. Are you still there, Gary?
Mayor,
I am.
we're gonna move into the,
That's what I thought.
Okay, so
We'll call you, Gary.
Bertha, you gonna
Just
turn
shut
that off?
everything down?
You just leave that on?
So you'll just call me on my phone?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just got news that Alicia, and she's brain dead and they're calling.
I would.
Now what?
Alicia Anna.
She serves on our Keep Ruidoso Beautiful.
Tim.
Yeah,
Now what happened?
she,
Let me go tell
she's
them.
been on a ventilator since before Christmas. And they thought she was doing better, and Scott and their daughter Sydney got called in early this morning, and they determined her that she's brain dead, so they're calling Sam. getting
What was the
everybody to
cause
the
for, that's Pirelli
She had lupus.
brothers.
She,
Yeah,
yeah,
she's been sick for years.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
It's too bad.
but it was all.
Where's Ron?
He'll be joining.
What? Oh, election issues.
Yes.
Yes.
We also have Joe who has an item.
Okay.
So I have talked to
Joe does?
Yes.
It's about that hangar that's going up for sale?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
We'll call you in.
Yes, sir.
Well, Joe, why don't you come in right away? Let's go.